Hey guys, welcome back to another video. This is Troy with Cichlid Bros. In today's video, it's pretty simple. We are just going around the fish room and feeding all of my aquariums, which currently there are 12 aquariums set up in my basement, in my office, and my koi pond outside, which is currently in the middle of winter. So let's start there. This is going to be short and sweet because this is my koi pond, but we are in the middle of January, so it is obviously iced over, and the koi go into a hibernation state during the winter, so I'm obviously not feeding this pond. It is absolutely freezing in here, so let's go ahead and go inside. So before we get to the 11 aquariums down in my basement, this is the one that is upstairs here in my office. This is the 5-gallon Spart Aquarium that I set up probably 6 months ago, and it just has one betta fish, which is absolutely awesome. I love this guy. Always very active while I'm doing work up here in my office. I also have a mystery snail in here that kind of cleans some of the algae, and a nice little aquascape with some plants that are starting to grow in. But I usually just feed this tank a little bit of crushed flakes, and everything has gone really well. I really like this guy, but let's check out some of the bigger fish. The first tank we're going to feed down in my basement is actually my 15-gallon saltwater tank. This is the Hello Reef Aquarium Kit, which has been set up for just over a year, and it currently has 2 clownfish in here. Since it's a pretty simple setup here, the main thing I do is feed the bulk reef supply pellets. This actually came with the kit itself, so I've just continued to use that for the majority of their feeding. But I'll also mix in some frozen foods like brine shrimp, maybe once every couple weeks for these guys, but they seem to love these pellets from bulk reef supply, so that's just what I continue to feed them, and they're doing great in here. So next up is the first big display tank down here in my basement. This is a 180-gallon acrylic aquarium that currently has a juvenile male stingray named Apollo and 5 electric blue acara, which I have grown up since they were babies that I had down here in my fish room. And all of these guys will eventually be going into the 500-gallon plywood aquarium that we're going to feed here in a minute. But this tank is a little more nuanced than my other aquariums because I feel like the stingray needs a lot more of a natural protein-based diet than some of the other fish. So I do feed the flake foods like krill flake and spirulina flake, especially to the electric blue acara. Sometimes the stingray will also go up and get that, but I'll also drop in the monster pellets from Extreme. These are 9mm, I believe, and the stingray will eat pretty much all of that, but I do need to feed this guy silver sides, shrimp, and other frozen foods to make sure he has a well-rounded diet. So with this tank, probably 2 or 3 days of the week, I will cut up a raw piece of shrimp or a silver side from my freezer, and I will just dump that in for the stingray. But it's actually kind of interesting, or annoying if you want to look at it that way, that the electric blue acara go after that food first, and so I do have to throw in flake food to kind of distract the electric blue acara so that the frozen foods get down to the stingray so that he can then jump on it. Sometimes the electric blue acara will take bits of the shrimp and go darting off in different directions in the tank, but it might be too big of a piece of shrimp for them to actually eat, so they'll leave it on the ground. Eventually I see the stingray go and get most of the shrimp. But I'll usually feed 1.5 to 2 raw shrimps that are cut up in pieces for the stingray. The electric blue acara gets some more of the dry foods. On the days that I don't feed the frozen foods, I do go with the pellets, the krill flakes, and the stingray still elects to go for that at times as well. But one interesting part about this is once the stingray goes in with the bigger cichlids that we'll see in a second, I will likely need to target feed him. So probably a long piece of PVC that I will put food down so that it gets down to him past the Oscar and past the Severums and allow him to get enough food even if he's down at the bottom when I have some aggressive feeders in the other tank. So these electric blue acara in here do kind of that same thing, but they are smaller in number and in size, so I can still kind of get around it easily. But in the plywood tank, I will have to take an extra layer of precaution. Next up, this is my 150-gallon South American cichlid tank, and I love this aquarium because it has a lot of live plants in here, so it's pulling out nitrates really nicely, and I don't have to do water changes on this tank quite as much. I really like the aquascape in here. It has 4 electric blue acara, 3 geophagus spini, a jurupari, a couple angelfish, a school of denizen barbs, which have gotten really, really big, and some plecos that kind of hide out at the bottom. Also, you may see a few new live plants that I tried rooting into the substrate of this aquarium, and geophagus, they just uproot everything, and as you can see, the dwarf sagittaria, the crypts, they all ended up at the top of the tank. So I try to get as much live plants in this aquarium as I can, but it's kind of at capacity, and I'm hoping the last few rooted plants stay down in the substrate, but we will see. But anyway, on this aquarium, I usually go with big fella pellets from Extreme. This is not a sponsored video, this is just what I use. You'll see some other foods outside of Extreme that I use on some other tanks, but primarily I go with the big fella pellets. They're 3 millimeters. Because these guys aren't quite as big as the stingray or my other fish, the 3 millimeters really do well for them. I will also mix in the spirulina and krill flakes pretty often, as well as a frozen food, maybe once every 2 weeks for this aquarium, like brine shrimp. But big fella pellets is kind of my go-to for this aquarium, and they go crazy for it. I really like this type of pellet because it sinks to the bottom, and when it's on the substrate, the geophagus especially will sift through that sand, getting any of that uneaten food. And most of these cichlids will do the same thing, so it's kind of interesting to watch that behavior, and it's just eaten really quickly, so I always stick to this one. And this is my 135 gallon African cichlid tank with Lake Malawi, peacocks, and haps, and these guys prefer a protein-based diet, so not trying to be repetitive here, but I do use the Extreme big fella pellets primarily. I also give them a lot of krill flake. I don't really mix in spirulina for these guys because they are so protein-based with their diets, but they are absolutely incredible to watch eat. They always come up to the front of the tank and splash me, and they just always eat as much as I put in this tank, so I do have to be careful not to overfeed. Today we're going to actually feed them the frozen brine shrimp that I already have thawed here, and once I put that in here they just go berserk and they eat everything in a matter of 20-30 seconds, and all these guys do really well together so far. And I've really enjoyed this tank, especially when I'm feeding it. Next we have my 90 gallon tank here, which has 1 discus left, as well as 3 or 4 angelfish, a school of rummy-nosed tetras, a couple bristlenose plecos, some corydoras, and some zebra loaches. I've also added some more plants to this aquarium. I'm really hoping to get the dwarf sagittaria to grow in. I've added more root tabs to hopefully help this really start flourishing more as a planted aquarium. But for this tank, since some of the fish are smaller, I go with the smaller pellets again from Extreme. These are the peewee pellets, and pretty much all of them will eat that. But one of the foods that I've just tested recently is from Ocean Nutrition, the discus flakes, and they all go crazy for this as well. So sometimes I'll mix in brands like this if there's something new on the market, or if I just want to see how that varied diet impacts the fish, I will do that. So today we are feeding the discus flakes, and I just put it right in the top. Some of the flakes slowly get down to the bottom, to the corydoras, the zebra loaches. The rummy-nosed tetras are doing incredible in this tank, and they're really fun to watch go after the food. My one remaining discus is doing way better than any of the discus I've had in the past, so I'm hoping he continues to thrive and grow. The angelfish have put on a lot of size since they've gone in this aquarium, so I'm really enjoying this tank now that it's a bit more under control and things are growing and thriving rather than having some of those issues that I had with the discus over the last year. So really enjoying this tank and can't wait to see it grow. Next up we have the big boy, the 500 gallon plywood aquarium with some of my favorite fish of all time. Of course the big Oscar, the Severums, the Geophagus tapajos, the Walrus. It's just an awesome aquarium with some South American cichlids and then a bala shark as well. And primarily what I feed these guys is Extreme monster pellets. Obviously the Oscar is really big, so they go crazy for this. I also give them much more spirulina flakes than my other aquariums because the Walrus and Severums require a much more vegetable-based diet, so this is really for them. I really like both the krill and spirulina flakes from Extreme because they are big-sized flakes, so you can give them to really big fish. My Oscar will go crazy for them and still eat them even though he's almost full size. Or you could crumble up some of those flakes to give some of your small fish as well. But also in this tank, I will feed some frozen foods at times. One additional thing I've started to feed to this aquarium has just been the raw shrimp. Since I'm already thawing and cutting up raw shrimp for my stingray now, I'll usually throw in another piece or two of shrimp and cut it up at the same time, and then I will give these guys some of the shrimp as well. I think it's really good for them, plus they're going to be getting some more of that once the stingray moves into this tank. But I will be moving the stingray and some of the electric blue acara into this tank very soon, and when I do that transfer video, I will probably show the process of feeding the stingray in here and how I intend to do it. I think it's going to be pretty interesting. It's kind of a hassle, but it is something that I'm prepared to do, and I think this tank is going to look awesome once I get some of those additional tank mates in here. And one thing I have been hiding a bit is what's happening on this side of the room. There's a new aquarium set up. There's a lot of really cool things that have happened over here. It's been over a year of a project, that I've been working on, and I didn't want to share it until it was complete. So probably my next video will be the full update of this side of the room, which I think you'll really see ties everything together along with the 2 aquariums we just saw. But that's not all. We also have a fish room with 5 more aquariums. Let's go check them out. Next, we are in my fish room or storage room. It's not the prettiest room, but I have some cool tanks in here. This is my 40-gallon breeder that's been a quarantine tank for all these fish, about 15 to 20 cherry barbs, 3 rams, 3 golden eye cichlids, and 2 bristlenose plecos. This stocking is going to change just slightly, but I am going to be setting up this aquarium very soon permanently. So these guys have done really well in their quarantine process. I have had no losses, and they are ready to go to their permanent tanks. Most of these guys will stay in here, but because they are smaller and some of these are dwarf cichlids, I will usually give them nano pellets, and I will just sprinkle it in. They're slow sinking, so all the fish kind of get some of that. Also, I give them a lot of the krill flake, and since again these guys are small, I will crumble up the flake as I'm putting it in the tank, and they go nuts for it. I've also given them some of those discus flakes that I showed earlier from the other brand, and they've liked that as well. So they're not really picky eaters. Most of the cichlids I've shown today would probably eat the majority of cichlid pellets and flake foods that are on the market today. Extreme is just what I've used primarily, even though things like Northfin, Omni Nutrition, Sarah even, some of those fish foods have still been really good for me over the years. But Extreme has just been my go-to over the years because my fish go crazy for it. They grow well, they have good color. It doesn't cloud up my tank too bad, and there's all the different size variations that I would need for any of the fish that I keep. But anyway, the 40-gallon breeder on the bottom here, this is my cold water aquarium with Gymnogeophagus terrapurpura. There are 4 left. They just had babies in here, so it's kind of torn up. They dug a few holes, and I don't think the babies lasted. I didn't scoop them out in time. I also have 6 or 7 panda cories in here and a couple green fire tetras, and it's not the prettiest tank because again of the breeding. The primary food I give this is the same one I give the 40-gallon on top, which is usually nano pellets, maybe even peewee pellets at times, which is 1.5 millimeters, or the crushed up flakes, and that's pretty much all they need. Next up is my 75-gallon tank with just 1 inhabitant, a Cuban cichlid. He is alone just because he's very aggressive. I originally thought I had a breeding pair, but they ended up being 2 males, so I gave my brother Quinn one of the Cubans, and then I still have this guy. He's grown really nicely and enjoyed the 75-gallon tank to himself. He does definitely destroy the substrate and move things around quite a bit, but one thing that's really cool to watch on this tank is whenever I feed krill flakes, he goes nuts for it, and the flakes, if they're floating at the surface, it's really cool to watch this ambush predation as he just goes crazy and skyrockets up to the top of the tank and attacks the food really aggressively. A lot of people comment and ask why I don't give live feeder fish to any of my cichlids or my fish, and it's pretty simple. I can give much more nutritious foods to my fish without transferring any diseases or any issues, and like this guy is showing, they can attack dry food even just as aggressively as if they're hunting a small sick goldfish in your tank. I did a full video on live feeder fish and the pros and cons of doing that, and I will leave that in the upper right hand corner. I highly suggest you check that out if you have questions there. But lastly, let's check out my 2 20-gallon tanks down here. The top one just has live plants right now, and it's just growing in. It's in a state of transition, similar to my top 40-gallon breeder tank. These 2 tanks will be permanently set up in aquascape very soon, and I can't wait to show the progress. You can already see some of the plants that I put in here to kind of kickstart their growth, and I'm going to be scaping and stocking this tank very soon. The tank at the bottom is another 20-gallon tank that's been a holding tank for my banded leperinus. I basically give him 1.5 millimeter pellets and some flakes. Occasionally I'll throw in some brine shrimp to him as well, and he eats a lot and aggressively. He's really active. This guy will grow to be about 14 inches, so he's going to be going into my plywood aquarium once he puts on enough size that I feel comfortable. That does it for our fish feeding today. Like I said, keep an eye out for the video of one of my favorite projects I've ever done on the channel. It'll likely be posting next week or this weekend, so definitely keep an eye out for that. I'm very excited to show off what we've been working on. Thanks again for watching, guys. See you next time.